Welcome to Twice 5 Miles Radio, fertile ground for conversations worth listening to and remembering. I'm your host, James Navé, always airing first on WPVM LP Asheville 103.7 and streaming online, WPVMFM.org, the voice of Asheville, heard all over the world and on other community radio stations like KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, out of Taos, New Mexico. Thank you, Walter Parks, for our theme song. WalterParks.com for more on Walter's music. Davine Dial, thank you for managing WPVM-FM in Asheville. And Robin Collier, thank you for managing KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, in Taos, New Mexico. If you'd like to reach me, Navé at jamesnavé.com is a great place to start. I'll always answer you back. I'd love to hear your story and learn where you are coming from. I'd like to remind you, we're sponsored by the Imaginative Storm Writing Project. If you'd like to improve your writing chops, imaginativestorm.com is a good place to go. You can build a few skills that you have maybe been dreaming of building. Who knows? Imaginativestorm.com. I just came off the Leaf Retreat, which is similar to the Leaf Festival. And at that retreat, I met Jessica Chilton, and Jessica was doing some improvisational work on stage, and I was in the audience, and I just loved the way she approached her improv and her spoken word and some of her singing. And afterwards, it turned out she and I had a few friends in common, and we started to talk, and I just liked her spirit and her spark. And she told me she does this very interesting thing called spirited improvisational work. So I thought, since we were both at the Leaf Retreat and since we were both performing and interacting with people, we just get together and see what happens. Jessica, welcome to Twice 5 Miles Radio.
So happy to be here to see what happens.
Well, I would like to start. I've been thinking about how to commence with you. And you talk about the spirited improv, and you talk about giving up things, letting things open up. And I am curious about that because when we do this kind of opening, we think in very positive ways. All spirit work is positive. All things are working together for good. And yet there's the duende, the other side, the nighttime side, the dark side. So I'm curious, in your work, in the spirited approach to being loose and free, how do you accommodate the contrast and the tension that exists between that contrast, between, say, embracing somebody and betraying somebody, loving somebody and hating somebody, fire and ice, all those contrasts? How does that work to power the improvisational thinking and the spiritual thinking?
Yes, it's true. I love spirited improv more than anything right now. And in it, what I love is the surrender. And when I say surrender, I'm talking about really relaxing into connection with my heart or my center or my spirit, whatever names you want to put to it. And then knowing that's my only responsibility. And I let go of the rest, meaning the rational mind gets to relax into service of the heart. Any bit of what happens for the person in the audience or the other person right now, you or the listener, is their responsibility. I have no responsibility for that. I let go of some of those human tendencies to control, and some of those emotional tendencies soften around fears. And then I'm able to be in the heart and let something happen. When I say spirited improv, or when I let something flow through the heart, it is clear to me that it is not rosy, sunshine, positive, rainbows and unicorns. That's not authentic. I look at spiritual as wholeness, and wholeness includes, embraces, accepts, loves it all, loves what is. So with spirited improv, I'm constantly creating within myself a state of beingness that welcomes wholeness. And then within groups, participants in my play shops, I'm curating and inviting them into that state of welcoming for the wholeness. And then with audiences, really inviting them into that wholeness, telling them even at the beginning, I have no control over the outcomes here, that your experience shall be blissful and joyful. No, you might be here to feel very uncomfortable, to feel shame bubble up, to feel guilt, to feel the burden of something, to feel your constriction or your fear. That might be the gift of this experience for you. So I am all about embracing it all.
I'm curious about this human tendency to control. We, as human beings, make things, we create things, and in the creation, we lean in the direction of form. Form implies control. I'm going to control my decisions. I will decide to put green on the canvas rather than red. I will control where I sit, where I stand, how I move. In our ability to control, there's also the contrast between no control. I can't control the outcome because I can't control the future. I'm only here in the moment. So speak more about control as a human asset that has a range that can work to one's advantage and one's disadvantage.
I relate to letting control be a big tool in my human toolbox. I spent much of life in that perfectionist, controlling manner of my artistic output. When I would be hired to give a presentation, it would be scripted. And I say this just for my own experience. I'm not saying this is right or wrong for anyone else's experience, but I would script what I was going to say to make sure it would be perfect. And then I would deliver it word for word so I could rely on that perfect outcome. Now, that's an oversimplification, but it highlights the role of control. And what control was doing for me, it was helping to create a fiction that I was really safe, because what I really was in the unknown. So we as humans are constantly in the unknown. Everything is unknown. We are used to using the coping strategy of control to create a sense of safety in that unknown. You could say, in terms of a helpful, so grateful for my friend control, which you could also say for my friend ego. My friend control can help me feel safe, put my nervous system at ease, help create desired outcomes around success, help get to a finish line on a certain project. It can do a really excellent job. But there came a time in my life where that excellent job, that perfected presentation, it didn't mean anything to me anymore. It didn't feel satisfying. It felt empty. And that was when I went into my own dissolution process, I call it, where I kind of became caterpillar soup in a cocoon for a while before I could reemerge as a butterfly. And in that process, I really chose surrender over control as that bigger tool in the toolbox. Now, of course, control is still there. It's just not the tool I go for when I'm wanting to feel that deeper soul satisfaction in life. And when I'm wanting to really improvise in life, or improvise and let the moment come alive in the way that it really can, if I don't try to control what the moment should be.
Don't you feel it's a bit ironic as you report your story about memorizing your speech, delivering it word for word? You came up empty. You failed to achieve the perfection you wanted. Or did you achieve the perfection you were reaching for? And once you realized it, did you realize that's not perfection at all? How did your relationship to perfectionism shift when you moved into more open-ended work within the context of the perfect universe, which of course always remains perfect regardless of what we do?
Yeah, before, perfectionism was of my own concocting. Perfectionism was a conglomerate of other people's expectations, or at least my perception of those expectations. It was society's conditionings around what is excellent and what is not. it was my own probably internal wounding that drove me towards getting things right and not wrong. It was a creation of my own making, a bar of my own choosing, setting it at the height that I wanted to achieve. Whereas the perfection that I am embracing now and that you're speaking to is that anything and everything within the wholeness is perfect innately, is perfect in what it brings to my journey, perfect for how it grows me, how it teaches me, is perfect for how it challenges me, is the perfect dose of suffering to wake me up to something, is the perfect dose of pain to help expand my heart to more compassion. It's perfect. And I use that in my improv play shops where we call everything we do on stage an experiment, and we call it all perfect and we call it all imperfect, because those two words to me I use in the same way. And for some participants, it liberates them to call it all imperfect. And for others, it liberates them to call it all perfect. To me, that's the wholeness of one same principle.
In a lot of the conversations I have with creatives, the word perfectionism comes up almost within the first 10 minutes of the conversation. And I also, and I've always been able to get some common agreement that perfection is already there. It is with us. We do not have to achieve it. In fact, we can't achieve it because it's a job that's already been done. What we can do is dwell in the perfect nature of the infinite universe. And the choices that we make regarding how we function within that can be measured, perfect or imperfect, good, bad, labeled all kinds of ways. But as soon as you lift the burden of perfectionism from the shoulders, I don't have to be perfect because that's already done. It's above my pay grade. I'll never be able to achieve it. Why bother? Now let's play.
Yes, now let's play. To me, that's where life gets really fun. And that's the chapter I'm in right now. Now let's play. And I like to play in the realm of the spiritual journey. I like to play with other soulful playmates.
And I've been reading and thinking a lot about the idea of the duende. Does that word ring a bell for you? Duende.
What is the definition of duende? I know I've heard of it.
It's the spirit that moves inside of you, that disturbs your blood, that no philosopher has ever been able to explain. And yet, when you see it, you know it's there. And it is a dance with death and life. And it's what makes art dangerous. It's what makes the governments fear the poets. It's why sometimes the speakeasies get shut down because the crowd is a bit rowdy. It's what makes you stop in a train station at 2 a.m. to listen to the lonely saxophone player, and you realize that you're completely alone and you like it. That's what the duende is. And the angel will fly over you and bless you. The muse will sort of disturb you, but the duende comes from the bottom of your souls, from the earth, and rises up through you if you invite it and allow it to come. So again, it's the dark and the light. It's the contrast between the two. And we're always struggling with the sense that we will eventually die. And in that struggle through our life, and the struggle in the best sense of I'm climbing the most beautiful mountain on earth, but the rocks are a little rocky right now. That struggle is what brings out a kind of artistic essence that people respond to, and they take a deep breath when they hear, say, Miles Davis play jazz tune or somebody sing in a way that's profound. So it's full of profundity. So that's what the duende is. And Frederick Garcia Lorca wrote an essay on the theory and the play of the duende. And that's where the idea of the muse, the angels, and the duende come from.
So I'm feeling an improv just rising up from the earth through duende, through your words. And I'd love to let that come out.
Well, let's do that. But before we do, explain to our listeners what in the world you mean by that. And maybe tell them what an improv is in case somebody's not sure what it is, because we're improving every second of the day. We just aren't aware of it. But these are more deliberate improvs that we invite ourselves to participate in. Give us a brief and then let's jump into something. I'll let you lead it. What do you say?
Yes. So I'll briefly say what I'm feeling because I'd like it to come out while it's still here. When I feel an improv wanting to come through me, I feel a welling of energy inside of me, which is what I'm feeling right now. And then I surrender and let it come through. So I'm going to do that. And then afterwards, I'm happy to answer any questions more from my rational mind. I feel it bubbling up like lava from the depths of the core of some magmatic container that's burst open into the soles of my feet. And it's flowing so fast with heat, and my heart's in its beat, just screaming to get out. Because nothing about this magma wants to be cooled down, wants to be ruled or controlled or even found, really. It's like a sound from the guttural elements of a volcano goddess who just came into town to break the news of something that it knows will shake humanity. And so it says, do not tame us. Do not tame the wild fires that want to burn what has expired. Don't tame us and put us in our cages behind bars for reasons that should be far removed from our own containment. We are born free and wild. And so in my heart comes this spark into this moment, wanting to blow open cerebral banter and let something canter, gallop wild through the field, the stallion, untamed. How would I bound with my soul if everyone in my life said soar? How would I be the ocean of me if there wasn't a sure thing that I was always waving, pleasing, like a princess in her carriage, appeasing? No! Off comes the gloves, off comes the gown, and now we've got bare feet on the ground because duende is boiling and bubbling from the soul, and now the wildness is ready to roll. So to me, what happens in the aftermath of an improv is that energy that was starting to build up in me is completely cleared out. It has made its way through me and out of me. And now it's a calm, it's a relaxed inside world. Sometimes there's an aftermath of a little shakiness, a little after tremble. It feels really good now. I used to get a vulnerability hangover every time I did it, and that would then contract and it would feel really uncomfortable. But now that I relax and just, I'm not attached to whatever that was for anyone else. All I am is committed to staying connected with my center and letting things move through my being and my body. And so whatever comes of that, everyone is free to make of it what they will.
So that had some duende as you were speaking. When you first started, you were finding your way. And then as you got deeper and deeper into it, you could feel the rational mind and the imaginative mind collaborating to create form. And you were very easy with it. You leaned into it. It happened. Somebody listening out there might be wondering, okay, that's all great for Jessica, but what about me? I've never done anything like this before. I have no idea how I would even start to whimper something, much less speak in full sentences with all that energy. So what do you say? How can we help people engage in what you just did?
in my Spirited Improv series, I get a chance to work with people who have never, ever done this before. And in fact, are so terrified of doing it that they made themselves sign up because they no longer want to live with that terror. It's such a blessing. They really bless me with their presence and bless me with their fears, because I get to learn so much from being together with them and seeing and witnessing that transformation. So to me, the first thing that is essential is creating an atmosphere of unconditional acceptance, radical love, total encouragement. That is something that I love the art of. And so I'm always bringing people into that heart space. And of course, there is a time and place for critique that elevates the fine art. However, in this space of Spirited Improv, that's really aimed at human liberation, that's really aimed at the expansion of the human's capacity to love, that is not the place for critique. That is why we create this, accept it as it is. Everything's perfect. Everything's imperfect. We don't critique it afterwards and say, oh, you could have been more expressive, or, oh, you took too much time. You were too big. None of that. It's always an honoring and then going on to the next experiment, getting curious from what we last just experienced, and then making a tweak, making a new invitation, creating a new improv form that brings us to that next place. So that environment is the first precursor to someone being able to let improv flow through them. And then from there, there's the yes and spirit of improv, which is really important, that lets us say yes internally. Like I said yes to that energy that I started feeling inside of me. I didn't say no. I didn't say not now. I didn't say, oh God, what's it going to be when it comes out? What are they going to think? I didn't get scared of it. I just simply noticed it and said yes. So that's the yes and internally. And then there's a yes and externally when you're playing with another person, where you want to say yes to their creative offerings and then build upon it with your own additions. And that's different than, of course, being like, no, I don't like your idea. Or kind of, sort of, but not really. And that's the same when you're really playing with the audience's energy or questions or whatever they're throwing out as words or themes for you to improvise. Always a yes spirit. So those two things create a foundation for being able to let something come through. And then we have all different kinds of forms that give a structure that, again, lets your ego feel a little safer in the unknown. And within that structure and that how-to of that improv form, you begin to feel like, okay, I'm going to follow these steps and let something happen. And then when things start to really flow, then you can let some of these steps dissolve and you can start making your own steps and your own rules. And so it's a dance of creating an atmosphere that's conducive to improv, giving structures that help people feel safe in the unknown, and then letting those structures dissolve when people are ready for that fuller surrender.
And I'm also thinking of people who hear you do this, and I've done this as well, and I'm easy with it because I've done it a whole lot. People don't think of the conversations they have on a daily basis at the coffee shop, at the convenience store, coming here, going there, meeting new people, talking to old friends. They seldom credit those conversations with improvisational value. They just think, well, I'm talking. I learned how to talk when I was a little child. I can talk. I can speak English. I can speak Spanish, French, whatever the language you speak. They seldom think of it as improvisational work. And yet, the ordinary conversation you have with someone as you're passing by, the fellow was a plumber here earlier. He and I got into a conversation about art and poetry, and he was asking me about lyrical poetry. And we were just chattering like a couple of magpies, chatter, chatter. And that was a complete pure improv. So one of the things I like to tell people, consider the conversations you have and feel free to label those conversations as improvisational work. So everything you do all day long, like the phone conversations you have, what we're doing right now, I'm improving right now. I don't quite know what I'm going to say, but I have a sense of it. As you listen to this, and if you'd like to try an improvisational moment alone in the room by yourself, sort of the in the shower moment. Start out by saying absolutely nothing. Just sit there and feel the containment that happens. Feel the creative tool you have as a body. And you will feel at some point within a minute an urge to say something. Maybe it's just a slight utterance. And when that utterance comes, I'm waiting now for something. Let me see if I can find it. Switchback. I don't know where that came from. So if you sit for a minute, something will pop out, and speak that something aloud in an empty room. And then wait for the next thing to pop out, and another word will pop, and another one. And then after that, a sentence will come. And that's the beginning of the more complicated improvisational work that Jessica does or that I can do. And once you start that and you give your creative urgency permission to drop its urgency and just enjoy its romp, you'll be surprised at how improvisationally competent you will become in a short period of time. Is that good advice, Jessica?
I love that advice. Yes, yes. I love simplifying it down to utter silence and then following that first impulse and uttering that word. And for those who are more into movement, it could be that the first impulse is a movement of the hand in a certain way. There are so many ways that we can improvise and already are improvising in daily life. I think it would be fun to go a little farther on this trajectory of what people can try at home. I go through different phases, and there was one phase where I was really wanting more of my daily life, especially mundane, ordinary acts of life, getting dressed, cooking, cleaning, things like that, to feel more alive, feel more like enlivening improv. So I would just dare myself to walk down the hallway in a way that I'd never walked down before. And so I'd walk down the hallway in all these different saunters or skips or weird, wacky, wonky hips, whatever it was. And that would just bring life into my body. And that's something you can do while you're washing dishes. How can you wash dishes in a different way than ever? How could you, while washing dishes, start speaking a language that you don't even know what it means as wash each plate? And just like that, you're washing dishes, but something creative is happening out of your mouth that you've never done before. So just these certain little tweaks. Also want to throw out there for those who can get playful. I often use accents to bring out an ability to take ourselves lightly instead of so seriously. Your accent doesn't need to be like certain other people. You're not trying to do a certain accent. You're just simply trying to change your voice so that you can break out of the confines of your norms. And I'm terrible at accents of trying to imitate anyone else, but I love using accents just to loosen up a bit, right? So I might start talking like this, and I'm just talking about how I go about my day all the time, and it's just so annoying how I just have this routine and this to-do list. It's like on my phone, and I get up my phone, and I just want to see what's next, and I cross it off like it's so satisfying. So just by bringing a little bit of an accent, that can start bringing the spirit of play, which is what is underlying improv, the spirit of play.
And that accent you did is also part of what actors do in character development. So an actor might find a different kind of tone in the voice. Like my voice is very low right now, and this is pretty much my tone. But I can have the higher voice of little Jimmy who lives on the liver. And little Jimmy, he talks like this. And well, little Jimmy was my friend one time, and then he went away, and now he came back and he brought me a gift. And with the gift, I unwrapped the gift, and little Jimmy smiled up and he said, "I want to be your friend again." And I said, "Okay, little Jimmy, I will accept you back into the fold." He said, "Thank you very much. I won't go away again for a while, but if I do, I'll let you know." Just by changing the register, you end up with a completely different character. Or another thing that I've noticed, if you want to play around with your characterization, if you twitch your nose up, I'm now twitching my nose up, and that's going to create a different kind of voice than if I frown like this and have my
brown hanging off my jaws like a lion who's quietly quite disappointed in the view.
Suddenly it changes.
Yes, I'm going to squeeze my nose together and I become like a little bitty mouse who just wants to run from your lion.
But when I go deep and I elongate my strange-looking face, I become like my great-grandpa from the zoo.
And there it is. Very easy to do. So those of you listening, if you could see us on the Zoom call, you would see our faces are quite animated. And of course, you did, Jessica, speak about how frightened people are to do this kind of stuff. Now, I'm sure some of you listening out there are not frightened. You'll wobble around in the mud, you'll jump off the trees, swing from the rafters, and all of that. But other folks listening, maybe that's you. You're thinking, my God, I could never do that. I'm too timid. This maybe isn't for everybody. But if you're called to it, if you think this is really interesting, I would like to try it, then it's worth just trying it a little bit. Well, maybe putting your finger in your mouth and moving it over a little bit so that it looks rather distorted, but in the distortion comes another character. Almost somebody who might be, riding an unwanted horse late at night under the full moon, looking for, well, possibly something to do that wouldn't quite be acceptable in society.
Yes, indeed. I am kind of wanting to come closer to that guy, strangely enough.
What happened to me was when I pulled my mouth over, there's something about the physicality. I put my finger in my mouth and just tugged my mouth over to my right. And in doing that, it triggered the character. And it also triggered the image of me riding a horse late at night through a woods somewhere. And I wasn't really up to good. I was up to no good. And yet you said, I want to know more about that character. And that character, at least in that moment, I was up to no good. I was not somebody safe to approach. I probably wouldn't fit into a fire circle at the Leaf Festival. I might get tossed into jail or something, right? And yet I'm compelling as the character. What is that? Why were you so compelled?
Because I'm compelled to move toward creative, enlivening, edgy, evocative.
You're very animated when you say that. And maybe that's why people get afraid, because when you start to rustle up all of the variables you possess inside of you, there are things you just don't even know you have that start to bubble up. And maybe those things are not suitable for your public persona. Maybe those are the secrets that you keep that you don't want your friends to know about. And yet, isn't that a good place to look to make art? Isn't that where the courage comes from to make the art? Because maybe you're going to say something that will get some pushback, or maybe it will get great celebration. You just don't know.
Yes, that is a place where some of the fears come from. Am I going to say something while improvising that was meant or that I thought would be better kept hidden? I think that there's also the fear of, in that same vein, what will others think of me? What will they judge of that which I'm sharing, right? So concern for others. And then there's the fear that I'm going to freeze and have nothing to say. And it's going to be completely embarrassing. And then there's the fear it won't somehow be good enough, or comparing myself to someone else, it won't be like they did it and they did it so well. So there are so many varieties of the kinds of fears that come up and then inhibit our flow with improv.
Yeah, that's quite true. And it's funny because the fear of really revealing those deeper secrets is one that I have. I don't really have that many deep secrets, but I have a few things floating around like everybody else does. So I do have a fear that I will charge out like the bull in the china shop and just break everything because I just let it rip and go. And I think people will be terrified by that. And I still haven't figured out how to get over that. I'm not as concerned about if I freeze. That's an easy one to deal with. All you have to do from a technical point of view is when you finally freeze or come to the end of whatever it is you're doing, you say thank you very much and walk off. The idea of what people will think does play into it because we have been taught to appeal. I want you to think well of me. You want me to think well of you. Most people I know do care about that. And yet in art, what people will think, that's a bit of a factor, but it might not be that great an asset because you might fall short of whatever it is in there that's going to disturb the blood. Back to the duende. I'm not going to show you my dark night duende in the train station because I'm afraid that you might feel ill about me or think poorly of me. And yet the artists who do show the duende, who do throw that out, along with the joy and the beauty and the love, because both come at the same time. If you're willing to do that, and this is where trust comes in. I've got to trust the creative spirits that encompass all forever and forever. Somehow that spirit, the container, the gigantic container, will favor me as a creative, will favor you as a creative, no matter what we put out there, as long as we show up and ride the breath into the night or the day, or a certain part of the day, or for many years, or stretching cycles of years, to quote Walt Whitman.
This openness to let it all come through is befriending that spirit or that improvisational force that comes through us. If we only want certain pretty parts to come through in our improv, we're not a wide open yes to that spirit of improv. I feel in my journey, powerful liberation has been realizing that I am only responsible for staying connected to my center or my heart and bringing myself back into connection when I'm disconnected. That's my only responsibility. I am not responsible for what Navé is thinking, what the audience members are feeling, what the listeners are wondering. Everybody's having their own perfect experience. Even if that involves hating what I'm saying, that's perfect for them. So as soon as I liberated myself from everybody else's business, then I became more free to let whatever come through while staying connected with my heart. So in what you share, I feel that you're getting into my business when you say, it might scare me. It might be, they might want to lock me up. It might be terrifying, whatever it is. That's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to stay connected with your center and let it come out. And then if my experience is super uncomfortable, then that discomfort is what is meant for me to be aware of and work with.
Quite true. And the reason I bring up my discomfort, I've done this a long time. I'm very, very comfortable with this. And yet I still haven't quite figured out how to deal with that uncertainty. And I do want to make one comment about the idea of being disconnected and connected. And I maybe would like to suggest a bit of a revision on the disconnection. In this kind of work, you engage, you show up, you throw yourself into it, and you feel the connection happen, and you catch the wave, if you want to use that metaphor, and you ride the wave, or you ride that connection, and then at some point, you feel it disconnect. Usually disconnection is maybe slightly unwanted. I don't want my disconnection to happen. I want to stay fully connected. Maybe if we revise that to say that when you feel that disconnection, it's actually not a disconnection. It's your connection cueing you to say, this beat is over. Stop now and move on. So it's actually a kind of connection that cues you to stop. And the art comes by knowing how to respond to that moment when it arrives, knowing how to stop as much as knowing how to begin. There you have your beginning, your middle, and an end. We're back to the rational mind. We're back to the imaginative storm, to the creative form. The form ends when your connection says stop. And then you stop. And then you do feel the connection that you felt subside.
Yeah. So in that, I'm hearing that you feel a connection to that wave, the creative energy that's coming through, and then you feel it come to a completion. And then that's what you're naming as, and then it's a healthy disconnection because that wave of energy has run its course.
Yeah.
Right? So beautiful. So I relate to that fully. When I'm talking about disconnection, I'm talking about when I turn my attention towards another person or another group of people. And now I'm leaning more into them than I am leaning into myself. And so that's the disconnection I'm talking about.
A nice nuance there. I like that. That's a different kind of disconnection. You've moved away from yourself. You're no longer listening to your connection, waiting to cue you to stop, but you're all busy in somebody else's grill trying to polish their car when you should be just paying attention to yourself and not worrying about your audience, which is sitting there generous in the first place.
Yeah, seriously. Nailed it, Navé.
So we're coming close to our time to close. Can we play a little bit before we go? You want to try something between us just to take us out, see what happens?
Yes, for sure. Let's play a few different ways and see which way is most fun. First, we'll play as two talking heads. Now, these two talking heads are part of the same body, but they talk in very different ways about very different things. And they're not talking to each other. They're talking straight to the listener. But the thing is, one of them has to be talking at all times, but they're constantly interrupting each other. So if you get interrupted in mid-word, you stop and the other person goes until you interrupt them, until they interrupt you. Still going on your own monologue, being uninfluenced by the other talking head.
Let's give it a try. I don't know how well I'll do with this. Now I'm nervous. You've done this and I haven't, so I'm...
That's okay. Right. That's right.
So
well, what theme? See, this is if we had a call-in radio show, we'd ask the audience to give us a theme. But instead, what theme, relevant perhaps to what we're talking about today, do you think would be juicy to explore? And we're going to both be sharing our perspectives in our own way around this theme. What is our theme, Navé?
How about unbridled liberation?
Yes. Let's listen. I want to take this bridle off right now. They're choking my teeth. I feel like gagging.
The liberation that I once had when I was young has stayed with me all my life. I wrapped myself in the cloak of mist that grew from the forest I wandered as a child, almost naked, yet unclothed.
I don't know why everybody wants to ride me like I'm theirs when I'm meant to be free galloping in this field of life. Get off the bridle train.
Naked and unclothed, I stood there on the bridle train without a bride. I found my unbridled liberation was in the small whisper of the wind that fell along the leaves that hung in the oak trees before I found the muscle cars and revved up the engines when I was young, thinking gasoline would solve the entire problem.
Yeah, and it's true. And when I stand alone in that field, in that meadow, and I just hear my breath and I just feel the wind, in that silence, that's freedom.
And who cares about the forest when you're burning with gasoline at 90 miles an hour on a straight line underneath the full moon, in love with everybody, looking for that final moment when you can vanish like some spirit in the night.
There we have it. Our two talking heads. Thanks for playing that game.
I'll play any game you want to play. I'm happy to just improv like crazy. I mentioned my good friend Tony Houston, who lives in Taos, and Tony and I often will do this. And we discuss the terrible, terrible state of the world using confusing metaphors that only make sense to the both of us. And it's just really great fun. Like, well, hello, Navé. This is your old friend, Tony. I'm down here squandering my life. And then I would say, well, Tony, I have known that you've been squandering your life, but I've often thought that you only did it in a soup can. Have you expanded your horizons? Well, my horizons have expanded, but I've gone blind in the process. Well, Tony, maybe if you come up here and kneel, I can help you see.
Bravo. I love how you can improvise with yourself, two parts of yourself.
Oh,
So
yeah.
let's do what idea just came to me? Oh, that's right. Remember a time when. So that's going to be the start of our sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And what this is like is us seeing each other freshly, and we are best friends. I can't wait to be best friends with you, Navé.
Okay.
And when we're best friends, we're just reminiscing. Remember that time when, and you can go go wherever the muse takes you as to the time we're remembering. But the important thing is that we're constantly saying yes and yes
and it can be fiction.
Oh yes.
Okay, great. All right. So you want to start?
Sure. Remember that time when we were in a coal mine? I was so grateful you were there because everything was dark.
I remember when we discussed going into that coal mine during the breakfast at the diner about a mile down the road, the one that your father owned. And I remember you had fried eggs and I had scrambled. We both had hash browns and we both loved ketchup. And you proposed the idea for this coal mine. And I remember you had something hidden there you wanted to show me. I remember what it was, but I'm going to let you tell me what it was. But I just want to see if you remember that.
I remember because first of all, the tater tots came out completely burned and crispy. Remember, it was like these black little blocks. And I said, that looks like coal. Am I supposed to eat that? And that's what then triggered my memory of what was down in the coal mine. And it was embarrassing. It was super embarrassing. But you, my bestie, that's the only reason I was willing to tell you. And I told you that my first bra was down in the coal mine because I dated a coal miner. And I did not want anybody to find it because it actually had one of those camp tags, Jessica Chilton on the bra because it went off to camp with me. And you were willing to go there with me.
And we found it. When we went down into the coal mine, it was still there. It was a bit on the worn side. And I stood there as you held it up, very happy, as if you had found the final part of the trophy, the bragging right, the accomplishment. This was the metaphor for you. This was the symbol of a great achievement. And I don't know if Johnny Jack, the coal miner, ever understood what you were after when the two of you went down in that coal mine and you took your bra off. I mean, it was deep in the earth. You got to admit. And I got the impression that you didn't really want to tell the whole story. You were young. People carry on when they're young. I understood that. And yet, do you remember how happy you were? But the oddest thing about it was you took the damn thing with you and we brought it back to your house and you washed it and hung it up to dry and you tried it on again and it fit. And you were so proud of yourself. I'm stunned at how that worked. And even though it started out red, it was a bit faded, more on the sad pink side. By the time you got it washed, it looked pretty good. It looked pretty good on you.
You are telling all of my secrets and none of yours. Do you remember how after I tried it on, I get it, I tried it on. And by the way, I had to try it on because it was like taking it back from Johnny. Because even though Johnny was awesome for the time, it was on my bucket list to, go down in the coal mine with a coal miner. It was on my bucket list, but then it was like one and done. And I didn't want Johnny to end up with the trophy. I needed to put it on my bucket list wall. So I had to get the bra back. Anyway, that's why I watched it. But turns out you had your own idea of what to do with that bra. And because we're best friends, I let you. And I think you had more fun than I did.
Well, I admit I did try it on. And
nice. Good admitting.
The coal mine maybe just reminded me of the many sides that we keep buried. And I thought it was kind of ironic, the bucket list, and then you bring the coal out of the mine in a bucket, but that's another story. I did try it on, and when I put that bra on and stood there before you in all of my glory, if you know what I mean, you applauded. And that inspired me. I went back up to New York City and got myself involved in some of the most fashionable experiences I had ever had in my life. And I was young. This was a while back, you and I did this, but I was very young at the time. And I was open to just being in many different arenas. That bra inspired me to go into the stock market, and I made a bundle, and I would always wear something dainty underneath my well-designed suit when I traded on the stock floor. I didn't realize that the trip to the coal mine would turn me into a billionaire, but it did, and I'm glad that it did, and I credit that bra for my great success in New York. And now, we're back here in our hometown. The diner's still there, and I can now afford all the tater tots in the world if I want. I could even buy the diner if I pleased. But your father's still not going to sell the thing. It's just part of what makes him who he is, if you know what I mean. And that bra, well, I hope you wear that for the rest of your life because it looked good on you, and it did me a great turn. And I think it looked pretty good on me too when I wore it. But you took it back. You wouldn't let me wear it at one time, but you only need one little spark for inspiration to carry you for the rest of your life.
Yes, Navé, you really wore that bra to its highest glory. And because you did, that's why I built my whole career around that bra. That's how I make all my income right now, because at my Spirited Improv workshops, of course, when someone's going through a lot of fear, we just put the bra on them. It just totally takes care of everything. So, thank you. I feel like you added some extra magnetism to that bra with all the achievements you had wearing it. So I really owe about 50% of my proceeds to you. So we'll both go and buy each other tater tots and call it good.
Well, it's great to be a billionaire. I think that's a good stopping point, don't you?
Yeah, I'd say.
So, Jessica, we're going to have to close on that little improvisational work. I do appreciate you taking the time to be on this call. I can't say I've ever done this kind of work on one of my radio shows. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it all pans out and what happens to the bra as the story gets told. Jessica, thank you for being on Twice 5 Miles Radio.
What a delight. I look forward to playing again together.
And there you go, my friends. Thus concludes my conversation with Jessica Chilton. As you could tell while you were listening to the improvisational playing Jessica and I were up to, you could tell how much we enjoyed it. And I indeed enjoy improvisational work. I do it because it's spontaneous. It's done in solitude to start with. And when it emerges, I feel a sense of joy. Solitude, spontaneity, joy. Those three categories sum up what the creative process is all about. It does start in solitude, whatever it is you're doing. And then it feels spontaneous because in that solitude, when you discover something inside of you, it pops up like it's been there forever and yet unseen, like an old, beautiful jacket or the outfit you have in your closet. Maybe you've forgotten about it. And yet there it is. It pops out Starts out in the closet, solitude, spontaneously pops out. You haven't seen it in a while. And then when you recognize it, you have a sense of joy. So in a sense, your outfit is doing its own improvisational work. But I do enjoy it, and I really do appreciate you listening to what Jessica and I attempted to do. We had a lot of fun, and I hope you did too. And so on that note, I would like to say thank you ever so much for listening to Twice 5 Miles Radio, fertile ground for conversations worth listening to. And remembering, I'm your host, James Navé, always airing first on WPVM LP Asheville 103.7 and streaming online, WPVMFM.org. The voice of Asheville, heard all over the world, and on other community radio stations like KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio out of Taos, New Mexico. Thank you to Veen Dial for managing WPVM-FM in Asheville. Robin Collier, thank you for managing KCEI in Taos, New Mexico. Walter Parks, appreciation always for your theme song. WalterParks.com for Walter's music. Navé at jamesnavé.com if you'd like to reach me. I'd like to remind you we are sponsored by the Imaginative Storm Writing Project. If you write and you would like to improve your writing skills, your chops, if you will, imaginativestorm.com is an excellent place to go. You'll find a lot of resources there. And on that note, once again, thank you for listening, tuning in, being part of this show. I really do appreciate it, and I hope you come back very soon. And until then, I'll catch you on that turnaround somewhere down the line.